Okay, so I hope that you've understood everything that we have learned till now. And all these concepts are very, very important in React, each and every one of them. And we will be using all these concepts that we just learned, and we will be using to produce our own application. This is a small project, like a mini project, and the application that we will be building is a to-do app, where you can write your to-do things, like this is what I want to do for today. So a to-do list, and I will show you how it is and what it is a little later. So basically you can insert the thing what you want to do today, you can delete it once you finish doing it. So it's basically like a reminder kind of an app. Now, thing is, I don't want to do it here because there are a lot of things already, and it will just become a lot of cluster, and it will just cause a little confusion. But if you want to continue it here, you can do it right here, because we will be using npx create react app again, and we'll be creating a to-do app, and that's about it. So this is all the concepts right here, and we'll be using all of it in this application that we are going to build. It is very exciting, and I hope you're excited as well to build your first application. And if time permits, we can also put it up to the internet, that is to the server. We will be using something called Netlify, and we will be putting it on the internet so that you can access it from anywhere, in your mobile phone, in your laptop, in your tab, in any part of the world. If you have an internet connection, and if it is put on the server, it will have a www.yourname.com or something like that. It'll have a domain name, and we can access it anywhere. It'll be live on the server, and it'll be running 24/7 on that server, so you can access it at any point of time. Now, and we'll also be using something called GitHub and Git, where we'll be learning those concepts as well. Now, I don't want to do it here, so I hope you've saved everything. You can go ahead and close this, and I hope you remember git bash. So let's go ahead to git bash. I will make the screen a little bigger for you, and right here in this we will be, so you can create a new folder and everything. So I have created a new, when I go to React apps, I've created another folder called to do, but you don't really have to do that. I'm just going to delete it, and I'm going to close this, and I'm going back to my Git. So here we can go to our desktop first. Okay, now we are in the desktop directory. Now, where am I supposed to go in my desktop? That is React app folder. So let's go to that. So React apps. Okay, it says no such file or directory. I'm sorry, I must have put the wrong. Okay, React apps. Should not do that again. Give it an easier name so that these kind of errors don't occur. Okay, so now once I'm in the directory, let's do our npx create -react -app, and the name I'm going to give is, you guessed it, so it's to do. And let's go ahead, and it'll create everything, and let's go jump into our Visual Studio Code, where we will be creating our application. Okay, so I hope it's done for you as well. It might have taken some time because there are a lot of files that needs to be installed, and that's a lot of files, and they're all very important, and it also depends on the internet speed, and it might take some time, so you need to wait patiently. You can go do something else productive during this time. And I hope you have all the things installed. It should have done it by now. So that's React DOM, and you have to see all of these, and that's actually a lot, and it should be done. So we can actually go out of this and later on do it in our Visual Studio Code for done. So you can close this, there's no problem in that, and then you can go to React apps, and here you see the folder to do created. We didn't have this earlier. It was a empty folder that I created, but I decided that I would be doing it in React apps itself. So anyways, so this should be created right after your practice app. Is a different folder, and to do that, if you go in here, you can see everything: the readme, the package, JSON, and the source and public and everything. That's all more modules. In the source you must see all of these as well. Okay, so we can close this and go ahead to Visual Studio Code. So in Visual Studio Code, when it opens, it's always it opens what we left, like what we had closed earlier, that will be left over, and the same thing opens up again. But we're not doing practice app anymore, so you can go ahead and close the terminal. And if you see, you are actually in practice app. Now we don't want to be here. We want to be in create a new folder called to do. So you want to open the folder to do. So you can open the folder right here, and let's go to React apps, and in that we want to open to do. So you can select this folder. Now once you've done this, you'll get a welcome because it's completely new. And the advantage of doing this is when you open the to do folder directly, we don't have to open we don't have to keep CD in it every time. So when you open the new terminal, it directly opens in to do. So we don't have to go CD to do this time. It directly opens right there. And that's why I closed the terminal up earlier. Okay. So enough of this, and this is complete about installation and everything. Now it's perfectly ready. We just have to build our app now. So let's go ahead up and start our server, our local development server. So that's npm start. Our local host should start, and then we can start creating our application. We can just push this down as it starts. You can go ahead to source and app.js. Let's just clear up some stuff. Before this, you can go to public. We can go to let's say index.html, and here there are a lot of unnecessary things. Okay, our local host is started, and you should be seeing this. So let's just minimize this for now, and we'll clear up everything. So you just have to clear the comments, so be very careful. If you delete something else, then you will get a critical error and it will not work. So just clear up the comments because it's pointless right here, and we can save that. And once that's done, we can just close this. We can go to app.js, and here we can actually remove some of the stuff, and can remove the entire thing right here from this div all the way to this div. And let's convert this function component to our class component. So let's just do that. Let's actually just remove the entire thing and code it from the top. That will be just easier. So let's start off with our app, class app extends. So don't make any other changes. Let's index.js be just like that. You can remove the comments if you want to, because that's unnecessary. You can just leave the rest of the things just as it is and not do anything and save this, because we'll just be getting the component into our index.js. That will be our home. So let's create more components and put it into that. Okay, so extends. So class app extends React dot component. We can actually remove this as well because this will give us an error. And let app.css be there, so we'll style everything there. So we are not creating any new file because that'll just be a lot of things. Okay, so that's react.component. Let's create our render function, and then right after this, let's give a return value. Open the bracket, and here let's give it a main div. And let's call this as, give it a class name as app itself. And once this is done, let's give a header. And before this, let's just save it and export it. showing as an error because we haven't export default app. That should be it. Let's see this. Yeah, it's empty, so we've removed everything. We can actually remove some of the logos and everything. You can remove this, just delete it. Shouldn't be a problem. Probably crash now. Okay, it hasn't, so that's good. Because we haven't used it anymore. Okay, so what we want to do is create a to-do list, and we can enter a to-do and it should go right here, and we can see, okay, that is what I'm supposed to do, and once I've finished my work I can delete it. So let me put this to the side so that we can do it side by side, and you should do this as well because it's more simpler. You can see it right away. Close this for now, and the size of this. Okay, that's perfect. Now in our header, let us give a form ID, and its ID is to do. Alright, and let's give it an input value of type is equal to text, and let's give it a placeholder, and the placeholder is enter the text, and we can close this. Now we've given our values, so let's save it for now and see if our, okay, so that has come here. It says enter text. Let's give it a submit button. It says add, so we add our list and it just comes right here. We will be styling it just after we finish with the app.js, and right after this let's give it a button. Type is submit. And we can close the button. We can go ahead and save that, and you should see button. Okay, we've not given it any value. Let's say what do you want to call it? Add. We want to add it to our list. Okay, that's our button. So we enter some value here and add it. Nothing happens now, it just refreshes. That will be, we'll also be discussing what just happened right now a little later. Once we click it, it reloads. The component gets refreshed, so any value I give, it goes away. Now we're not having any backend for this application. We're not having any backend for this app. But it is completely dynamic. It changes accordingly, and we will be creating everything inside this. So there is no backend, and we're just concentrating on front end. That is what a React library is supposed to do. And once this is done, let's give it an on-click and check if it's working well. So as soon as submit, let's give it an on-click function. We've done this before, somewhat similar to this, so let's check that out. Now on click, I want to give it a function called added. So once I click it, it has to say I've added the thing. So I know the app is working. This is just testing. So once I click add, the text I've entered should get added. So let's just give it a try. Let's just test. So inside the render method, not inside of return, but inside of render, let's give it the added is our function that we're giving. So let added is equal to arrow function, where we just learned earlier. So this is the reason we had to do ES6 syntax, where we learned arrow functions and classes and everything, because we just used our class and we just used arrow functions. So all that was very, very important. So if you don't know that, we cannot do this. Now let's give it an alert saying the task has been added. Task added. So that's just enough. Don't have to be very elaborate for this. You can save this. Now when I click something and say add, it says task added. I can say OK, and I can give it an E. Now before I show you what event does is, so let's just save this again. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that as well. So let's say task 1. Now when I say add, it says task added. It gives me an alert. This is just, but what I'm supposed to do is it's supposed to come here and save itself, but we'll do that a little later. But let's just test for now. And I say okay, it refreshes. That is what it rendered. It just rendered all over again. It re-rendered. But I don't want to do that. I don't want the data to go away. So let's say I put some value, and this time it's not going here to an alert, but it gets added here. And I say okay, it gets re-rendered. It just comes back to the previous state. There is not an error, but this is what it is supposed to do. This is it is default. Now we have to remove the default. So once that event has occurred, that's E, or let's just say event for now. We can also say E or event. Now in event we can say event dot prevent that default. What was happening? Now what this does is, so what the prevent default means, the default thing about React or the browser or the DOM is to re-render itself, and it comes back to the original DOM browser, the browser in the beginning. Now I don't want that, so let me save it. Now let's try doing the same thing. Say task 1, I add it, it says task added, I say okay, that did not re-render or it did not refresh. Now if you didn't observe that, you can go ahead and remove this as well. And now let's say task 1, add it. Now I'm pressing OK, and observe right here how it re-renders. It just re-rendered. Now you might think that this is not that important. You might not be able to see why that is. So once we start entering our input here, and when we do not add prevent default, you will realize how important it is. Now let's go ahead and style our component. Let's just make it a little bigger. This is our app.css. We can go ahead, Control A, and remove the entire thing. We'll be doing it from scratch because that is of no use. Before we do that, let's give our app the name right over here. It's called, what is the name of the application? So that will be right after the header, and let's give it a h1 with an ID of title. And what's the title? It is to do, or you can say to do app. Save this and you will see that to do app right here. I know this looks very much aligned, but when you make it big, it's okay. It's aligned because not saved it. Once we save this, it is not very much aligned right now because the CSS, and there's nothing CSS. There's no styling for this. Now let's just bring it back to be small. Okay, so I want it to be in the center of to do, and this should be in the center, and everything else, all the styling will be done in app.css. So let's go ahead and do that. So first, with the beginning, we'll just concentrate on to do, and that will basically be title. That's the name that we gave. So let's just focus on ID, that is title. So hashtag, that is to point out that it's an ID, and if it's a class, then if it's a class name, then it's a dot. So for an ID, it's hash. Now ID title, I want it to be in the center, so text align center. Save this. It should be in the center now. Yes, it's perfectly in the center. And right after this, let's concentrate on our body, and the background of the body would be the color. The color background will be hashtag 12343B. This is the hexadecimal code that is for our color. Save this, and this should be your color. I feel that's like a nice color, but you have some favorite color of yours, you can go ahead and change it to anything you want. You can go and search in Google for some hexa codes for your colors, and you can go ahead and put that for your application, or you can just say black or white or any other color. Like for example, let me just show it to you. So I say white and save it. It's white. Now I can also call it black, or let's give it blue. It's blue, but that looks very bad. It doesn't look nice. So I'm just going to give it my custom color. Alright, so let's save that, and right after this let's go ahead and style. What do we want to style next? It will be app. Let's style the entire class, that is app. Let's do the div now. Dot app. Okay, so what shall the background color of app be? So the app will just be contain this part of the list, the form. Now let's give it a background color of hashtag E1 E382. Okay, so the background has changed. Now if you're getting confused, you can go ahead to developer tools. Alright, and right here you can see body. The entire thing is the body, and now when you go here, right inside app, right inside the title, you can see that app is only that part. So that's why when we gave the color in the app, it just colors this entire part, because that is inside of app, the entire thing right here. So you can look it up if you're getting confused, but the body is the entire thing, the entire application itself, and just the head. Okay, so I hope you understood that part. Now let's just style it, and let's give it a height of 600 pixels. Okay, want it to be more to the center, so let's just change the width. That'll make more sense. So let's change the width to 300 pixels. Okay, that is not nice. Let's change it to 500 pixels. Okay, that's quite big enough, and we want to put it in the center, so let's give it a margin of 50 pixels on the top and the bottom, but on the left let's just make it auto, and that will take us to the center. So basically I have a margin of 50 pixels here and 50 pixels from the bottom, but on the left and the right it is auto, so it will make it equal this side and equal of this side. So I'll just give it 50 and 50. It makes it equal, half and half. So I brought it to the center. Now let's give it a border style. Let's say solid. So we'll go check that. Okay, it just gives a nice solid background. Okay, that looks pretty enough. Let's just not make it very pretty, because we'll be focusing completely on React and functions and everything. So let's not take more time in app.csn. Let's quickly finish it. So let's make it a radius of 1 rem, but it has to look pretty so that even when you look at it, it looks nice. So this will be change the border radius here. You see it was curved and now it's not. Okay, so right after this, let's give it a border color. I don't like white. I mean, I don't like black. So let's give it a border color of white. Okay, that looks nice. You can change it to whatever you wish. Now what else? So we have to make changes to our input. So that will be our form. We'll have to make changes to our form. So that is ID is to do. Now let's give it a hashtag to do, because it's an ID. It's a hashtag. So ID input. So it goes to the to do and then to the input that is here. So form ID, and we're just accessing input inside a form. Now that is here, right here. So we want to change that a little because it does not look nice. So let's give it a background color of white. Let's save that. Okay. And right after this, let's give it a border of 0 pixels, and let's change the width of it to 20 or 18 rem. Okay, and okay, we can just make it smaller. So that will be easier for you to view, and you can see the changes live. I don't have to go each time. Okay, so then I'll change the height of the input field to, let's say, 2 rem. So this is just another instead of pixels, I'm just using rem, so you can use anything, it won't make much of a difference. So that's margin, but the values are obviously, so 1 rem value will be some 10 pixels or something like that. You can check it up, but you can just use smaller numbers and it's simpler. Now this I'll give it a margin of 3 rem. Okay, that looks better. Then let's change the padding. Padding will basically make this a little further away from everything. So a padding can be from 0 and 20 pixels, the left and the right. The center can be same. And let's give it a border radius. It's too square. It looks like something really old. Let's just quickly give the border radius of 10 pixels. Okay, that looks much better. We can make it a little bigger by giving it, okay, we can make it 15. Fine, that looks quite nice. You can actually, 18 was better. So let's just give it. So right after this, there's a small other changes which we need to make. That would be for the placeholder and this thing. So the placeholder is enter text. So we have to just make some changes to that. So hashtag to how do we access it? So that will be input to colons and placeholder. And for this, let's just give it a color black. It's black now, much better. And we'll just change the button. The button looks like it's from the 1990s. Let's just change that. Hashtag to do button. Let's get smaller. Just observe the button and we will make the changes. So let's give it a width of 3 rem. 4 would be better. And the height will be 2 rem. Let's got a little make it a little bigger. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, and I wish I could just make this a little smaller, but anyways, it's going out of the okay, so okay, that's better. I hope you can see, and here you can just make our changes quickly and we'll finish it with this. Let's get a padding of 0 and 10 pixels. That will be better. And then right after this, let's give it a border radius of just 3 pixels. Just keep it small, and border is 0. You can either style this or you can go ahead and not, because then we'll be deploying it, and if you're going to show it to somebody, they'll ask why the styling is not good. Because front end is also about styling. Now background color, is hashtag. You can give it anything you want, but this is what I want for my app, and that's the reason that is the value I'm giving. Let's give it a color, that is the color as in the add, the 3-letter word, that will have a value of white. Alright, and font size shall be 15 pixels, and font weight will be bold. Save this, and this is how it's going to look. Now this is all the styling done for the app. Now if we enter anything, nothing really happens. Yes, the task, this thing gets done and it just re-renders. That's all we have done with the functionality, but what we want to do is when we add some value, let's say task 1, it has to come here and say, okay, this is my first to do. This is what I want to do first, this one I want to do second. It should come like a list. Now for that we need to go back to app.js and app.js and make some changes. So let's go back here. Let's make this a little bigger, and we can bring this to its original size. Okay, so we can close this and go back to app.js, and in app.js we will be making some changes to create a list. So right in the return, let's just add some functions to it. We can go ahead and remove onClick added. That was just for test, so we can remove this function as well right here. So this should be for it now. And inside of form, we will be giving some values, and that will be for your input and for your form. So let's give some function. So right after placeholder, click enter, and let's give it a value of, so this will have a function, and that will be a method that is this dot state dot current to do dot text. If you're wondering what this is basically just like earlier we're getting it from a constructor that will have a state. If you see state here, that's why I wrote this before I. So from what we had done earlier, you should remember that this is coming from a state. So this dot state. So for this dot state, we need to create a constructor and give it some values. So let's go ahead and do that. If you don't know what this is, you will know right now. So in our class component, let's create our constructor, not inside the render, but right outside of render, inside of our class. So that will be constructor props, and inside of that will be super props. And right here we'll create our state object, and inside our state object we'll create a first thing called to do, which is basically contains an array or a list of to-dos. All the to-dos will be inside in the form of array, and the current to-do. Now whatever the current to-do is, what is current to-do? Now when I give a task 1 and I add it, it has to go right here in state. That is our current to-do. So what does that contain? A text and a key. Now that is what we access right here, a text. And the input shall be a text, and we will give it a key. Now the current to do is an other object inside an object, that is object inside an object. So that will be text. This will be empty for now. We will update it later. So to update some state, what are we supposed to do? We cannot do it directly right here. We are supposed to do something called this dot set state. We had learned it earlier. Now right after this, we have to give it some key. This will also have no value at all. We will be updating it a little later. So the constructor is done, and right after this, so this is actually closing the state right here. The constructor is from here to here, the purple brackets. Now once this is done, let's go ahead, and this is the function, which is how we are accessing the value. Now what this does is, the input placeholder, that is enter text, as soon as I enter the text, let's say task 1, and I click on add, that is the value I am giving. correct? So that goes and gets stored right here, but dynamically, that is in our this.set state. The value does get entered, but what happens after that? It just can't just get saved and saved for what? Now we need to change, right? Now so we will be creating something called onChange function, where a method, this was this dot handle change. So when I say add, there is some change happening. So onChange stores this handle.change is basically a method. What happens is this will handle the change. This will handle the change done to our application. So this is a method. And this value is what is getting stored when we add it. And once the change is done, it goes to this particular method. So let's go ahead and create that method. But before we create that method, we need to do something else. And that is nothing but in our form ID right here. So the value is taking the value that we entered, and after it is getting changed, that is also being done. But nothing is happening to the form that is being submitted. Once we submit, we need a function to handle that as well. So let's give the form some value right here as, let's say, onAdd. OnAdd will be a nice name for it. Let's say onSubmit actually, because this is what we are submitting. So onSubmit, what is it going to happen? Get added. It will get added to the list. So this is dot add item. Now, if you are a little overwhelmed with all of this, I will explain it again. You can either skip this if you have understood to the next part where I'll be continuing with the functions, or you can listen to it all over again. So the value stores it but does not display it in our list. OnChange handles the change, that is the change made to the application. Now we need to display it on the list. The change has been handled, the value has been stored, but it hasn't been displayed. So when do we display it? When we click on it. When we click add on submit, the list has to be displayed. So that will add it to the list. That's about it. So those are the three things that we need, those three changes that we need to make. Now let's go ahead and create the add item method, and we'll also create the handle change method. Okay, so let's go and create the handle change method first, and let's see what it does. So right after the constructor is closed, we need to create the handle change method and open the brackets. Now handle change is basically handling a change. What is the change that is being made? The change being made is the current to do, but that is in a state. So what do you have to think now? You have to say, okay, how do I change the state? That is done by this dot set state. That's how you change a state, right? So we'll open the brackets and current to do. That's the object that we're changing, and text is what we need to change. We'll accessing current to do, we are accessing text and the key change. So what is the text? The text is basically the value that we have added, right? So we've added some value, and this is what we're storing. This change that we're handling. So event dot target dot. Now I told about event earlier as well, and what event does is the basic thing. The event is basically what's going to happen, and we are targeting some event that is going to change, and that is what we want the event to do. Whatever the event is targeting, that is what it's going to do. What are we targeting? The value that is being changed, right? So value. So what happens now? Now this dot state dot current to do dot text will get stored in value. Event is targeting value and storing it in text. That's the object that is being stored. It's as simple as that. I hope you've understood that. Now we'll be giving it a key value. This will be a unique ID for that particular text, so that it is completely unique on its own, and we can access it using the key. Now we can use something called UUID. You can look it up. but that makes it a little, very little complicated, so I will not do that. I'll make it something more simpler. This is not very unique, but it still gives a basic unique value if you're just doing some 1 to 100 to-dos. So let's say math dot floor. So this is just a little bit of math right here because we're giving it some key. It's a number. So math dot random into 100. Now what does this do? Math.random always returns a decimal number. What does math.random do? It returns a decimal number. So we need to round off that number first. So that will be because I don't want a decimal value for my key. I want it to be a round number, something 1, 2, 3, 4, something like that. So it will be math.floor does that work for us. It converts it to it'll round it off. By multiplying with 100, we are saying it can be between 0 to 99. You can increase the value. If you want it to be between 0 to 999, it's 1000, and 0 to 9999, it's 10,000. So those are the random numbers that is created and given to this text. I'm just going to keep it simple and make it 100. And right after this, let us give a semicolon right here so that it shows that it's closed. Let's save it. Okay, it's going to crash because we have not created our add item function and a lot of things. Also, it is giving us unexpected use of event. I'm sorry about that. We haven't given event into our method. Now you go save this and oh, okay, so it doesn't really ask, but it should probably give us an error. Let's see if it actually, okay, so it says cannot read property set state of undefined. So it's the same error that we get in forms. So basically it's not able to read the set state value because it says it's undefined, and that is because it is not binding to the constructor. Let's go ahead and write outside of this dot state, right? It's outside of this, but inside the constructor, let's bind it to it. Let's bind the value, and how do we do that? So this dot runs 4, so this dot handle change is equal to this dot handle change dot bind. So I'm just binding it, and let's call it as this. This is what I'm binding. We should similarly do it for add item as well. We've not done that function yet, but we will be doing it, so it will give us the same error because it won't be bound to it. So this dot add item is equal to this dot add item dot bind this. Okay, so once we've done that, we'll save it again. Okay, cannot read the property bind because add item. So let's just not focus on this. Let's finish off our functions and then check it out. So add item is the next method we need to do. So that's add item, and let's const new item. So we're just adding this item. How do we add it? I'm going to access this dot state dot current to do. Now what I am doing is I am going to access the current to do. Now you might want to go here, obviously. So this dot state dot current to do is basically going here, right here. But there is a handle change of the value. Now on change, because the value gets changed after the value being added, what the handle change does is it creates a this dot set state. So the value is changed, and it should give us this value is basically the task 1 that we create. And let's console this out and see if what we are entering is actually coming out. So that will be new item. Let's save this now, and hopefully we will not be getting any errors. Okay, so there are no any errors, so we have to Now check if the value is being added. Do you remember what we learned and what just happened? So before I told you that the value will get added, but it'll just get re-rendered. Do you see it re-rendering? So what have we not done? We missed out the main thing here, that is events, and that will be event to prevent default. That is what we're supposed to do. We have to put to prevent default, but I completely forgot about that. If we don't prevent the default, the value will get changed and everything was going to happen, but it's just going to not show it. It'll just get re-rendered and everything will be wasted. Okay, now let's try it. Task 1, add, and obviously it won't show up right here. Where it is showing up is because we are logging it out. Now let's go and check it in developer console. That is F12, or you can right click and inspect. Go to console and you see an object right here which says task 1, giving it a key value of 9. How cool is that? So I hope that you understood till here. So what just basically happened is that we created an add item method where on submit it runs this and gets the current to do that we have added, and this handle changes the value. Does not change the value, but it sets the state to the value that we gave. It is being completely dynamic, and it gives a key value, a random key value, and it takes task 1. If you want to see if it actually gives a random key value, let's give it to task 2, add it, and you can see another task with a different key value, that is 58. This is task 2. Let's give it task 3, and it's an object again with the text as task 3 and the key value 98. So anywhere between 0 to 99 the values of key is going to come, and the text is task 1. But this is not what we want to do. We know it's working, but this is not what we want to do. We want it to come here. Task 1, task 2, task 3, right? So let's go make the changes for that. And the changes will be right here in the add item, because that will add the item. This just changes the value and stores the value. And this stores the value, this changes the value, this adds the value to this, our application. Now let's go ahead and go to add item, and in add item let's make the changes. So you can either remove this, delete it, but you can keep it for your console. You can check it in your console if it's actually coming. Now let's give it an if, and let's say new item, that is this, that's what we're taking, that is the current to do that is stored, that is task 1 and some key. It is stored in new item. Now new item dot text, I'm not going to access key, I'm just going to access the text value, and I'm going to check if it is not null, as in if it's a string, or if it is empty. Now if it is not empty, then I am going to store it in a new to do. Now what that means is, now this new item that I've just entered, that I've just added, it is a new to do. This is the new thing I want to do, and I want a new to do right here. That is my first task, a new task. I want it right here. That I am going to store that as, it is going to unpack. It is we just have to do dot 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 this. This is called as the destructuring assignment. So it will unpack the value from new item and store it in a form of an array. So it won't be in form of an object, but it will be in a form of an array where we can access it. So this dot state dot to do comma new item. So it will unpack new item, store it in this dot state dot to do. Now what is this dot state dot to do? That is right here. This dot state to do. So it will get the key and the So if you're confused saying new item, you're just checking the text. I'm checking if the text is not null. I'm checking if the text is not equal to empty value. Now if it is not empty, then the new item still that is here contains both the text and the key. That will get stored in to do. Right here it gets stored as text and the key, and that value I'm going to store in new to do. You have to understand these basic concepts. It will just make it very simpler. Now I'm going, so right after I have stored it, right after I have stored this value right here, I want to make this empty. Now I say task1 and I add it. I don't want that value to remain here forever. I want it to become enter task, and I can enter my new task. It shouldn't stay the same. It shouldn't be static. So I am going to empty everything. So this dot, I'm going to this dot set state. I know I've used it here, so I'm going to set state again. This is the next time it's going to run. This time I'm going to empty it back and make it into the original thing, but my to do value will be the new to do value. So this time I'm changing the set state to do. I'm going to put my task1 right here, and I'm going to clear this. So this is what is happening right here. I'm going to say the current to do is going to be empty. And the key will also be. Now what happened here? It was a lot of things. So it checks if it is not if it's not empty. So task1 I have entered. I say add it. Now it is going to unpack the new item value, store it in the to do. Just like before, we changed the value here. It's getting stored in default, and I'm going to store it in new to do. Now I'm just going to change this state. I can't obviously change the state here. It will still be like this. Now I'm going to change. It won't be like this. To do will be empty, but current to do, the text and the key values would have changed, right? Because I've already ran handle change, which will change the state to task1 and it give it some key value. But the to do value is still empty, and that is where I am storing it. And once I have stored it and I put it into the object, I am going to clear the current to do, which contains task1 and the key. I'm going to clear everything so that I can add a new task. But this to do needs to be displayed right here, correct? So that is the entire thing about this. Now go ahead and create a new file which will contain the list of all of these to-dos. So this is basically, that's why it is an array. It contains a list of to-dos, and for this we'll be creating a new component, because just the list part will be a new component. As I told earlier about components in a blog, the blog itself is a different component. Each blog and the header is different, the footer is different. So similarly, the list of to-dos will be in a different component. So go ahead and to source and right click and create a new file called to-do list.js. We can save this right here. And okay, so there are no errors. Perfect. And in to-do.list, let's import React again. And let's create a function component. So here we don't have to necessarily create a class component, because in a class component, to get the props, we'll have to use a constructor and all that. So in a function, we can directly access props. And the reason we're going to access props is, earlier you learned that from a component we can send arguments in the form of props to another component, correct? That is what we learned earlier. What did we learn? We could send arguments from one component to another by passing an argument or some value, by passing an argument to the component, and it will be received as a prop as a property in another component. So this is basically a function component, and I will be receiving a value that is the to-do value, because that is the list we're creating, right? The to-do list, I'll be sending it from this component to right here in the form of props. It's as simple as that. So nothing to break your head about. It's very simple. I'm just passing the properties, just the values. And for now, I'm just going to return h1 to see if I'm actually accessing this component in app.js. So let's see if I'm accessing the to-do list. So it has to come here. This will be my component, the to-do list component. And I'm going to say list from component to-do list. Yeah. And I'm going to save it. I haven't exported it actually. So I'll export default to-do list. That's beautiful. Let's save it and go here. Now where do I want to see it? Let's see in, put it right after the header actually we have exported it, but we did not import it. So let's import. What did we export? To-do list. This is the component we exported. So to-do list is the component I want from the file. What's the file name? To-do list. You can give the file name anything, won't be a problem. Okay, so let's just access that component right here after the header. Call it as to-do list. Save this, and it says cannot resolve, module not found. There must be some sort of an error. What seems to be the error? It says the module cannot be found. Okay, so I am importing it. Oh, I did not put the file. Okay, now we should save it. Right. Okay, no. So that should be it. It should work now. Okay, so it's working. So this is coming from the component list from component to-do list. So I am sending it from here as because this particular part will be just for the to-do list. But I do not want to enter it manually or a static one. It has to happen dynamically. So I'll pass some arguments right here and get that value out there. Correct? Now what is it that I want to send? I want to send this. Correct? I want to send to-do. I want to send the new to-do which is stored in to-do, which has a list of all the to-dos. How do I access it? First thing, I want to give it a variable name, that is, I'll just give it as to-do because that will make it more simpler. I'll open the brackets and close the brackets. I'm going to access this dot state dot to-do. This is what I'm accessing, this dot state dot to-do, but it's not empty. The state has been changed. It has a new value, right? That's what we did right here. And this will be passed. What am I doing here? I'm passing it as an argument to the component that is the to-do list, where we'll be receiving it as props. Save this and go ahead to to-do list, and here we need to make some changes, right? We need to access it. The data is sent but not accessed. So const to-do is equal to props dot to-do. I'm using props here. We just use this dot state. Once we have sent this, this is the object we need to access. So here we'll be saying props dot to do, and now I'm going to loop it. I'm going to loop each of the, because it is an array, right? It has all the values stored in it, many values. So 0, 1 has an index value. I can map it. I hope you know about the map function. If you don't, you can go ahead and Google it. It is some JavaScript data structure. So it is just to loop. Instead of using a for loop, you can use map. So it's just a way to loop. It is a looping method. And list to do will be equals to, now I am going to access this to do and I'm going to map over all the items inside of it. So to do dot map. Let's actually just make some space here. I'll map, and to map I need to put a variable that is let's say item. So what item does is, it is just some variable and it has index values of 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's say there are 10 to-dos. So it's going to access each of them. So an item goes to 0 index, the item goes to 1 index, and item goes to 2 index. So it has task 0, task 1, task 2. It accesses each of it. Now what will I do by accessing it? I'm going to use my arrow function, and then I'm going to return some value. Because map the method, it's going to loop, and I can say, before we have done this before, we can add our JSX inside this. This is the biggest advantage of React, that is JSX. So when I was teaching JSX in the earlier module, in the earlier section, you remember how we returned a JSX value itself. So that's why I'm saying this is an accumulation, it's a compilation of all the concepts that we have learned, that is JSX, components, nested components, everything, props, states, everything that we have learned, but we also put some logic into it, and it is good to use logic because that helps our program. Now by doing that, I'm just going to give it a class name of they're all lists, right? So I'm just going to log. There's a log, like what is a log? Like attendance log or something like that, where they keep a log of everything. Now I'm just keeping a log of all the to-dos that I need to complete, right? Now it also has key, and how do I access it? So I'm just going to give a variable name called key, and I'm going to access it by saying item.key, because what item contains is the text and the key. That to-do contains the text and the key. To contains all the text and the keys, and item accesses each one of these texts with its keys. So what do I want to display? The paragraph tag. Obviously I don't want to display the key. I'm just going to display item.text. Now if I want to display the key as well, I can also display the key, but I don't want to do that. I just want to display the text. And this entire thing is stored in list to do. You can see it has not lightened up, so I've not used it. I need to return. This is a function component, right? I don't see any return value. It still stays list from component to do list. Remove this. It has to return this variable. What does this variable contain? It maps around each of these to-dos, and it puts it in a div and puts it in a paragraph and displays it here. So we'll do that. Let's return that value, and in the return statement, let's give it a div, and right inside this div, let's give it a list of to-dos. So in brackets, let's guess the list to do. Now you see that lightened up, so we are returning it. Remember, this return is different from this return. This is the function component returning some value to render it inside of the browser, but sorry about that. So list to do, you see it lightened up. This return is basically returning as a value to the list to variable, and this basically gets stored, and we are rendering it here to be displayed on the browser. This is actually sent to app.js and then to index, and that's how the data flow is. But you don't have to worry about that. Now it seems like this is dimmed out. It's not bright because the bracket is not closed. Now once the bracket is closed, let's save it. It gives us some error. It says expected an assignment of function call. Let's go ahead and see what the error is. This does not seem to light up yet, so there must be some kind of an error. Maybe we have not do not close this bracket as well. Okay, that bracket is closed. Okay, so it says expected an assignment or function call, and instead it's on expression. It's probably, and also it's pointing out at the 16th line, it's probably not able to understand the return call. Let's try putting some brackets. Okay, it seems to have lightened up. This shouldn't have happened, but in some of the times it might happen. Let's go ahead and save it. Alright, so it's working now. Now let's go and add some value. I hope you understood how this works. Let's first try it out and see if it's working. Okay, so that's the task 1. Alright, so right now you do see it right here. This is what we were trying to do, and I want to see a list of all of this, and that is the reason the to-do is a form for list, an array, and where you can access each of these. Let's try and add another one. Beautiful. So it comes right after this, and I hope you understood how this works. There was a bit of a problem here because I hadn't put the brackets. Sometimes it does work without the brackets, but do go ahead and put the brackets and just play around, because the rest of the logic is perfectly right. It's going to map on each of the items, and the item.text is displayed inside of the variable. So I'm just returning this variable from this function component, and it is being rendered. Now this app is actually, all of these are not being rendered here. If you can see, there's no React DOM. If you go ahead to index.js, the app component is used. So what happened right here? This is how it works. Now in index.js there's app component, and inside the amp component there is another component that is the to-do list. So it goes, the data flow goes like that. So that's about it. I hope you understood this, and now we will just style this up and make it look better, and let's do that now. So go ahead and create a new file called to-do list.css. And before we forget, let's just import it right here. Import the to-do list.css. Now that'll be better if we do it in the beginning, because later we might forget. Now let's just make some changes to the tasks list here, make it look better, because this clearly does not localize. We can add another one, task 3, and then see the changes respectively. Let's refresh it. Let it be empty, and let's just add one task for now. Let's just focus on that. Okay. Now this is what we will be doing. It's actually quite less, not a lot. And what have we called it as? Let's call it as log, right? So that's the advantage. So this is what we're trying to style. Now the log will be the entire div right here. So dot log. Let's give it a font size of large, and a font weight bold. Save this and save this as well. Okay, so it refreshed, re-rendered. Okay, so it's bold and it's pretty. It's large and it's bold. Awesome. Okay, now let's give it a color of hashtag 82716E. That's what I want it to be. This is the background. That looks like a nice color. You can add anything you want. Let's change the height of that, because it's too narrow, it's too small. Let's give it a nice 50 pixels. Okay, and we need to change the margin. That will be 10 pixels on the top and the bottom, and auto on the right and left. Okay, and then after this it will be the width. Let's keep it at 200 pixels in the beginning. Okay, that's too small. 400 might be better. 400 looks quite nice, but this is too much to the edge, so we need to bring it here. But this is basically the paragraph, so we'll focus on that right after this. But this is too much of a square, So let's give it a border radius of 0.4 rem. So let's just try 0.8. Yeah, that looks fine. Yeah, you can change that later if you want to. Now I'm going to access the paragraph and just give it a padding of 0.8 rem. I feel like that's a little too much. Let's just make it really small, 2.2 rem. Yeah, that's nice. So this is just the basic of your application, task 2, and this will be your third task. So this is, now we just need to add the delete function where we're going to delete our task. So I've completed my first task. Let's say by milk, and the enter key also works. You don't have to go and click on add. Now the next one will be prepare for exam, or the next one will be something like get medicines, or take dog for a walk. Beautiful. Our app is working perfectly fine, and you can actually increase the size of this, because once this has come, it will get out of this and it will not look nice. Or you can click it on auto. We can also change the height to auto, but that will not look nice as well, but this should be good. We can also make some changes to this by saying we can go to to-do list, and here we can go to the text and say we can make it 2 uppercase. We did it earlier, if you remember. Okay, so I'm just going to say buy eggs. I'm going to add it. It will be converted. It will convert into capital, and then we put it here. You can do such things. You can just play around with a little bit more. So right after this, we will be focusing on how to delete our task, and that should end with our app. So yeah,